webinar is to introduce NHADEC members to one another and give each one the opportunity to tell us about their business and capabilities. My name is Sean Foote, and I will be your host today. I am the Supply Chain Manager at Transport and head of the NHADEC Marketing Committee. The format for today's webinar is as follows. We have two presentations. Each presenter will have approximately 8 minutes to talk about their company. At the end of each presentation, there will be some time for Q&A. You can ask a question by typing it into the chat pane, and I will pose it to them directly. I will be monitoring time and keeping us on track. I may close Q&A if we're running a little long. Again, use the chat pane if you have any questions for me during the webinar, and I will address them during Q&A or when there's a break during the presentations. Before we start, one housekeeping item. As this is lunchtime, I anticipate many of you will be eating lunch during the broadcast. Please put yourself on mute if you are not presenting. So now I'd like to introduce Nicolette Reed, Vice President of Evolutions in Business. Welcome, Nicolette.
Thank you so much, Sean. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicolette Reed, and I am Vice President of Evolutions in Business. That is our website on the front right now that you're able to see, which is eib.com. My slide is dancing. Hang on. I'll click it. Okay. So EIB, who are we? Evolutions in Business provides export compliance training and support services to U.S. companies. We've been in business since 1989. We are a small, family-owned and operated company headquartered out of Chelmsford, Massachusetts, but we travel throughout the United States, and we have clients throughout the United States, not just in New England. So what do we do at EIB? So whether your products are commercial or for the defense industry, EIB can assist you in navigating the government export regulations. We are knowledgeable in both Export Administration Regulations, the EAR, as well as the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, ITAR. We also handle free trade agreements like NAFTA, and we can assist U.S. critical technology companies. Sorry, I just got a message from somebody, so I was just trying to see what that was. Apologize. So we are knowledgeable in both the Export Administration Regulations, EAR, as well as the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, ITAR. We also handle free trade agreements like NAFTA, and we can assist United States critical technology companies in foreign mergers and acquisition compliance as well. So those are a whole different set of regulations, which are called FIRMA and CFIUS. So who can we help? Our client base is very diverse. They manufacture everything from military and or commercial parts and components for the aerospace, marine, and biomedical industries, as well as electronics and telecommunications, lasers and sensors, and basically everything in between. When it comes to the actual products that you make, sky's the limit. We can assist any industry in export compliance. If you make it here in the U.S. and you want to ship it internationally, we can teach you how to be compliant every step of the way. So why should a company care about export regulations? Well, there's civil and criminal penalties, negative public relations, disruption of your international trade, legal costs, and lost time and revenue. So who's responsible for export compliance at your company? Well, officers of the company like the CEO, CFO, president, and controllers, they're responsible for the legal ramifications of overall export compliance by their company. You guys are the ones who can go to jail and pay the fine if the violation is big enough. Managers at the company, they're responsible for meeting the requirements of export compliance by their companies. Export administrators, they're responsible for day-to-day export compliance. Examples are screening against denied parties, documenting, and record-keeping for all exports. An external company like Evolutions in Business, who is us, or an export manager at your company, they're the ones who are responsible for training export personnel and implementing compliance procedures at the company. So what kind of fines can you expect? Well, under IEPA, a statutory amendment was set forth in the USA Patriot Act. So civil penalties, which are just little accidents or, a little bit of negligence here and there, those start at $250,000. Criminal violators may be fined up to $1 million or face up to 20 years of imprisonment. And you can have multiple violations in a single transaction. So why do we have export controls? I know probably some of you are thinking we make really small, benign parts and components, but you would be surprised what those parts and components can be used for in the wrong hands. So we actually have export controls for things like national security, non-proliferation of weapons, foreign policy, and anti-terrorism. So who is your customer? We live in a world where many times we don't even see our customers face-to-face. A lot of times I'm giving webinars, and I don't always get to meet my customers face-to-face when I'm training them. So it's very important. Do you know the customer red flags? There's actually 23 customer red flags, which are especially important when you're dealing with a brand new customer. All right, but I'll tell you what the top 3 are. The customer or purchasing agent is vague, evasive, or inconsistent in providing information about the end use of a product. All right, or the product's capabilities do not fit the buyer's line of business or level of technical sophistication. Or the customer wants to pay for large shipments in cash. Those are the top 3 red flags. So a word about everybody's favorite ECCN, which is EAR 99. You keep using that word, and I don't think it means what you think it means. If you have not seen The Princess Bride, please see that. It's a great movie. But I say that because a lot of people haven't done the research necessary to determine their actual ECCNs. And somewhere along the line, somebody told them their stuff was EAR 99. So many commercial items are actually not EAR 99. Below is a list of many products that you could possibly be making. And if you make parts or components for any of these items below, then most likely your ECCN is not items. Those are going to have a real specific ECCN. These are all the different reasons for control on commercial products alone. These are reasons for control for your products that control which countries can receive them. We know all these, and we're happy to teach you. We can also assist a company in developing an EMCP, EMS, ECP, whatever abbreviation you want to use. It's an export compliance program that's meant to assist in mitigating any negligent act by an employee. An ECP is basically a manual for exporting, incorporating your company policy guidelines and a product country matrix so that all the people involved in exporting at your company can research that information at the touch of a button. Don't wait for a failure to happen to start addressing your export compliance, because failures equal lost revenue. It's against U.S. law. U.S. Customs is watching. Paperwork is reviewed. Shipments are inspected, and shippers are even being visited. So don't let this happen to you. And yes, it can actually happen. So export compliance, whether we like it or not, it's the law. We make it simple at EIB. So at this point, I guess I'll open up questions for the audience.
Well, thank you, Nicola. That was me who messaged you by accident. So I do have a question. How do you usually go about your education process for your clients, or say if you're a new customer, what would be the first steps you kind of walk them through to whether to pick up their business or get a better idea of what they do? Kind of walk us through that aspect, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. That's actually a great question. So the first thing we do is something we call a gap analysis over the phone, which is it's a really short phone interview where we ask some basic questions about the countries you do business with and the products that you make. And then that kind of tells us if you are a commercial company or a military defense company, or many companies are actually in the business of doing both. So once we understand that, then we know what kind of training and education that you need. And we can do that a few different ways. We can come to your facility and do a live training, or we can do it through webinar. And you can have unlimited attendance through the webinar. A few times a year, we do speak at Rhode Island University or the New Hampshire Trade Resource Center. We do some public trainings in that regard. But yeah, first we start with a gap analysis and figure out what products you make, where you ship to, And sometimes we also choose to come in there and do a physical audit. A lot of times we do that if it's an ITAR company, just to make sure that you're handling your security, facility access correctly, your foreign national visitor policy is robust, and those types of things.
Oh, well, that's excellent. Not to tee you off for the webinar, but I believe NHADEC in Evolutions in Business is going to be doing a webinar education series next year. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. So we're still kind of figuring all that out, which topics we're going to cover, but we're going to cover a variety of export compliance related topics through a webinar series that people can sign up for through NHADEC. It'll probably be myself and also Jeanette Reed, who is our president, will probably take turns doing those webinars. But yeah, we are looking forward to doing those next fall. I believe one of the topics we will be covering is possibly CFIUS, and that has to do with if you are a company that makes critical technology, so not necessarily defense products, but products that are considered high technology, critical technology products. If you want to have an acquisition or merger with a foreign entity or a foreign parent company even, you actually have to notify ODTC 60 days in advance in writing of your wish to have that type of merger, because that actually has to be approved by our State Department and our government, because now you're going to be sharing that critical technology knowledge with a foreign entity, and so we want to protect that technology. So you actually have to apply for permission before you can even go forward with the sale, and there's a lot of paperwork involved with that, but we are knowledgeable and can hold your hand through that process as well.
Well, that's excellent, because that stuff does get pretty in-depth pretty quickly. Well, I believe that's all we have for questions for you for now, Nicolette. I appreciate your time and giving us your presentation today.
Excellent. Thank you for having us.
Anytime.
All right.
For more information about those webinars, we will be sending out sign-ups and newsletters and all that jazz coming up, as Nicolette has said, and just look out for that. Now, I'd like to introduce Greg Brzezinski, Director of Outside Sales at Aerodynamics. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Sean. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit of information on our business here at Aerodynamics. So as Sean mentioned, I am Greg Brzezinski. I'm the Director of Outside Sales with Aerodynamics, although I have my hands in quite a few aspects of the company. Just sales are what get the majority of my time. So essentially, Aerodynamics was established in 1989. We've been operating in Seabrook, New Hampshire ever since then, although we did relocate just a mile down the road from where we were previously about 10 years ago. We operate in a 45,000 square foot manufacturing facility. And we have roughly 35. It's actually a few higher. We just made a couple hires. So closing in on 40 employees now. One thing we're particularly proud of is that we are comprised of 50% millennials and 50% women at this point. So we've made a big push on diversity and youth, and that initiative has gone a long way for us, and it's definitely kind of helped us advance and stay modern, which is a big deal for us over here. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, we provide the niche service of metal finishing and electroplating, primarily within the aerospace and defense industries. So if you're unfamiliar with metal finishing, essentially it's a value-added service to manufacturers. We take machine parts and apply a wet chemical process that improves specific surface properties of the metal part. So it's applied to many different industries for different reasons. An example of like a commercial use would be bathroom accessories are often nickel plated. for cosmetic purposes. And, there are a lot of decorative and cosmetic applications for metal finishing. I'm sure you've heard of, like, chrome plating car rims, for example, is another example of that. We don't get involved with that aspect of metal finishing. We do non-cosmetic metal finishing, for the most part, critical military and defense parts. So an example of the type of work we do would be landing gear on military airplanes. A small part of this landing gear is ball bearings that are chrome plated to increase lubricity during the impact of landing. So our capabilities at Aerodynamics consist of 7 different finishes. Now, that's a far cry from 15 years ago. We used to do 50-plus finishes. So essentially, you name it, we did it as far as metal finishing goes. But we made a decision along the way that we wanted to become specialized in aerospace finishes. Before, we were doing a lot of commercial work and medical work as well. Now we are very focused on aerospace and defense work. So as a result, we're achieving a much higher level of quality and consistency now that we've narrowed it down to 7 main finishes, which are most common within aerospace and defense finishing. So our philosophy is we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but instead we're trying to be the best at the select finishes which we do provide. So the 7 finishes that we are providing consist of anodizing, which is used primarily for corrosion resistance to increase hardness of the part and wear resistance and improve lubricity. Black oxide is used to reduce light reflection, mild corrosion resistance, improve lubricity, and has no dimensional impact. Chemical film is a corrosion resistance finish, and it is also extremely useful in paint adhesion. So if a military part needs to be painted, this helps the paint stick to the part. Chrome is also a corrosion resistance finish. It increases the hardness of the part and wear resistance as well. Electroless nickel is used for uniform thickness, corrosion resistance, increased hardness, wear resistance, and a few other purposes. And the passivation of stainless steel is primarily for corrosion resistance. So those, as you can see, a lot of the finishes kind of overlap in what they're used for, but depending on the material, one may be better than the other or necessary. So from there, essentially, we don't only specialize in those finishes, we also specialize in precision masking and racking. So, we're, like I mentioned, we're finishing critical aerospace and defense parts, often, flight critical airplane parts for our military. So we take extreme care in our work. We're not really plating like sheet metal, for example, that we're going to, stick in a basket and run down the line of tanks and chemicals. We are doing very detailed and precision racking and masking. So our masking expertise includes the use of wet spray, wax, paint, and industry-proven tapes, and a variety of different plugs individually designed for our customers' applications. And these techniques are employed by trained masking specialists dedicated exclusively to each customer's program. So we have people whose sole job that they've been doing for years is to mask these products, these metal parts. And if you're not familiar with what masking is, if only a specific portion of the metal part needs to receive the finish, we mask the other areas of the part so that they are not, touched by the chemical and they remain unchanged while the desired areas get the finish that we're targeting. And as far as our racking goes, our racking and tooling proficiency allows us to develop customized solutions to any racking and tooling challenges. So a lot of these parts are very tricky as far as how we're going to get them on a rack without leaving any marks, without scratching them, and we are really specialized in this. We use quality materials tailored to ensure that our plating process meets the requirements of our customers' drawings. Another big thing that we hang our hat on is our variety of certifications. So our governing body and quality system is the NHADEC quality system. We have been NHADEC compliant since 1996, but for the past 6 years, we've received merit status with NHADEC. So that kind of separates us from your typical NHADEC plating house. It essentially acknowledges that we go above and beyond the required minimums to be approved by NHADEC. So we achieve this status through audit processes in which we are found to be complying very strictly to NHADEC quality standards. And our president actually sits on the NHADEC quality board, and we have a few other employees who are voting members of NHADEC. So we're very involved with NHADEC. We're very invested in that quality system as a whole. We also have our federal firearms license. This allows us, obviously, to do work with firearms and defense work. Something we're very proud of is the fact that we are a certified women-owned small business. And this is, as you may know, it's very rare that a manufacturing company, and especially a metal finishing company, is a women-owned business. So we're proud of that. It's also a very big advantage for us, given that a lot of the prime aerospace and defense companies, they have mandates on diversity suppliers. So we actually check that box for them, given that we're a women-owned small business. We can help them fulfill those mandates if they, come to us with their work. So that ends up being a big advantage for us. And we also just believe in that cause. We locally promote women in manufacturing, and some of that has to do with some work with Great Bay Community College and other organizations in the Seacoast, New Hampshire area. And lastly, we are ITAR compliant, which I believe Nicolette touched on as well a bit. But so that's the International Traffic in Arms regulation. So that just about does it for me, guys. I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. First, I'd like to say it looks like the watermark on your presentation had come over, so I'd like to formally apologize for that, because that would be a user error on my end. But a question for you I have would be, what sets you apart from other plating shops?
Good question. So there's a handful of things that I would say set us apart. As I mentioned during my presentation, one thing would definitely be our specialization, where, your standard plating shop, they're going to be involved in a variety of different finishes, a variety of different industries. So they're not going to have the specific knowledge of some of the nuances of the aerospace and defense industry that we have, being that we, are very dedicated to that specific line of work. Something else that helps set us apart is our level of customer service is something that we take a lot of pride in. If you call up Aerodynamics, you're going to get a human on the line every time. And we're very accessible. You can call, and if you want to speak to the owner of the company about an issue that you're having or a question that you have, more than likely you'll be able to get them on the line. And it's not smoke and mirrors where you're speaking to automated messages and things like that. I think also the fact that we take pride in our consistency and our quality, where some of our competition, things can get sloppy, and we look to avoid that. We really take a lot of pride in our work, knowing that where these parts end up, often on the front lines with our troops and overseas, we take a lot of pride in that. We're patriotic here, and we have veterans who work for the company, and we just take a lot of pride knowing that these parts often end up in the hands or in the equipment of our military. That gives you an idea.
Yeah, I think that nails it right on the head. I have one more question for you. Do you guys plan on adding any more finishes to your lines?
So at the moment, we are pretty dead set on the finishes that we're currently providing. We will occasionally get, inquiries or requests for quotes on other finishes that we don't do, and that can be tempting at times when we keep seeing, requests for the same finishes. For example, zinc plating is, I'm out on the road doing sales, and oftentimes a prospect or an existing client will be looking into the possibility of if we can do zinc plating for them. And it's just not something we offer, although it does come up quite a bit. Reason being that, it's not specialized for the aerospace and defense industries. It's a very commercial finish, although it can have applications in defense. It's more commonly a commercial finish where it's just not really something we're looking to be involved in. We like the fact that we're specialized, and we're likely going to keep that way, at least in the near future. Well,
that's excellent. That's good news. Well, I'd like to thank everyone so much for. I'd like to thank all the presenters as well as our audience and attendees. I sincerely appreciate your time and attention. Our next Lunchtime Connections is scheduled for November 13th, and we have Fred C. Church and Comstock Industries that will be our members presenting. If you'd like to refer to this presentation or share it with someone you think would be interested, the video of today's episode will be posted on YouTube and on our NHADEC blog. And if you were an attendee today and are interested in being a presenter at an upcoming episode, please send me an email. Thanks again for attending, and I look forward to having you guys see us at our next Lunchtime Connections.